Hi and welcome. After the recap of basic notions of intercepts and geometry of Part 6, we now see how things are put into practice. Let's start by adding a tomcat to our scenario. Then copy and paste it somewhere, then adjust the paths. Next, let's set it to client. For the first exercise, let's keep this simple. Co-alt, co-speed, Magvar negligible, as we are flying in the Marianas, and we can measure the target setting. Piece of advice, make sure that two aircraft are not too far, 80-85 nautical miles work fine. Expect to detect the target at 60 something nautical miles. The goal of the first scenario is setting up a collision course and maintain it until we cross the target. Let's speed up time a bit until we get something on the radar. There we go, 60 something miles. I see basically no drift, ATA 15 left, DOP or direction of passage is left to right. Let's compute a heading cross angle, target aspect and aspect angle. To do this we check the BDHI, paying attention to the parallax effect. Our heading is 360, the target is flying circa 150. ATA is 15, ergo AA is 165 right. And this means target aspect 15 right. The assumed collision antenna triangle is therefore 15. As we pass the 15 nautical miles mark, we can change the scale of the DDD. If you remember, this is the farthest of the so-called AI ranges, or air intercept ranges. Now we can think about locking the target. The intercept drift is minimal and well highlighted by means of the erase knob. Therefore, we maintain our parameters as the range decreases. We are at 20 nautical miles. Let's say we want to tell our pilot where to look for the incoming target. For this purpose, we can use the RIO report, acronym for azimuth, range, elevation and overtake. We don't know the closure without the lock, although it can be eyeballed, but we can still provide the other parameters, for example 20 left, 50 miles level. We have now noticed an increase in the drift ratio, corresponding to an increase in TA or decrease in AA, a small correction to make the intercept hotter and we should be fine. As the parameters change, we can update the pilot, 25 left, 8 miles level. The idea is proceeding until the pilot's called tally. And there the radar heat is quite stable in the air, a symptom of good collision. This was just a simple scenario, but considering how close we have passed, and we have studied separated by 85 nautical miles, it's quite cool, isn't it? Watching the intercept from TAC view is useful to study the action from a different perspective. As mentioned, not much to see here, but taking it easy helps in the long term. Alright, the previous one was easy. Let's shake things up a little bit by having the target flying at a greater angle. We can use the same mission, and now the target is flying 120 rather than 147. We've got the target at pretty much the same range, but now the drift is more visible. ATA is about 25 left, so the usual check on the BDHI, and we find the HTA is 120. AA is 145 right, again, and for the TA lovers, the value is 35 right. Using the co-speed assumption, we take the collision antenna triangle equals TA, and thus we need to turn right until the ATA is 35. We pass the 50 nautical miles mark and we can load the target. Most of the information should be displayed on the TID, but for our purpose we're fine. On the right of the DDD we see the closure rate, in this case it's about 700 knots. We know that the target is quite already, although I meant today is drunk and our tomcat is wobbling a bit, causing the L strobe to move. Also, if you remember one of my old articles, I noticed that the indicator is about a degree or half a degree too low. I'm not sure what causes this, perhaps the AOA. Anyway, using the new work in progress Nibor page, we can approximate the altitude difference between our aeroplane and the target. In this case, we know that we are co-altitude, but let's say the L strobe was correct. and the target was really flying 1 degree lower. At the region of 20 nautical miles, this translates into circa 2000 feet. Ergo the target would be flying at 23,000 feet. And the rest of the Intercept is the same as before, but we've now introduced 2 new indications, the EL strobe to verify the altitude difference and the closure rate. Scenario 3, let's spice up things a little bit more by changing the target altitude and speed. 30,000 feet, Mach 0.6. The angles are the same, but we will notice something different, namely the approximate collision antenna turn angle based on the course speed assumption will not work anymore. Also, new objective. This time we want to grind the target aspect down and conversely, the aspect angle up to have the target close to the nose for an M7 sparrow shot. If you have watched the video I made in the Timeline 2023 series where I used Arma 3 and boats to demonstrate how the Intercept can be made hotter or colder, the steps we want to follow should be quite simple to visualize. As before, the target is flying 120 plus 25 ATA. This gives 145 AA or 35 TA, ergo course speed CATA would be 35 left. However, we would like to employ an M7 and the angles are not that good. There are several ways to do the next step. For instance, we can turn 90 cut and therefore 90 ACA, but we have no data link and we don't want to lose radar awareness. Therefore, we place the target at the gimbal limits and accelerate. Because without saying that we are in the F-14 and the F-4 has different controls and azimuth and range settings. Another thing we notice is how the higher bar illuminates the target, not the second. There is, therefore, a different altitude-wise. Let's move to 1 bar and have a look. The target appears to be higher, and it is illuminated at about 1 degree at 50-55 nautical miles. This gives us a target flying between 5,000 and 10,000 feet higher than our Tomcat, and therefore 30,000 or 35,000 feet. Later, as we get closer, we can refine the approximation. This also means that the closer we're getting, the higher the antenna elevation angles must be set to see the target. Now, the easiest solution would be an SCT lock. However, this has several drawbacks. For example, we would be alerting the target, probably something not necessary at this phase. Moreover, the AI in DCS automatically flips their ACM on the nanosecond they are locked, thus affecting our SA. Last example, if you are playing with a realistic campaign when there is no open conflict yet, a hard lock would be seen as an act of aggression. Anyway, back to us, let's recap the next steps. In premise, keep an eye on the elevation angle, turn hard 35 right or starboard steady up 035, command buster, which is hard to do with Iceman, so I'll just accelerate a bit. Recalculate the angles and monitor the target as it will tend to drift left and out of the scope. At circa 15-20 nautical miles we may want to lock in a CT and hand over to the pilot, calling to center up the T and prepare to launch a Fox 1 AIM-7 Sparrow. As we approach the 40 nautical miles, let's have a look at the angles. HCA is now 90, ATA 50-55, AA 145, TA 35. The tricky part is maintaining the target within gimbal limits, which requires corrections port side. At 30 nautical miles, we recap the angles. We are now flying 025-ish, so HCA is about 100, AA is 160, TA is now down to 20. The drift is conspicuous, so better start slowing down a little. At 25 nautical miles, the drift is very noticeable. Again, if the ATA goes up, the AA goes up as well, whilst TA goes down, which is what we want. Whilst I was feeding with the track IR, I lost target for a moment and the elevation angle is inversely proportional for the range, and I quickly fixed that. I'm on it. 20 nautical miles, SCT lock, and I commanded to place the target close to the nose, and if I had a pilot, the appropriate call would have been to center up the T, where the T refers to the AAC. I decided to maintain a lower altitude approach, imagining a VID. Satisfied, Fox 1 for a couple of miles away. The AI reacted in a nanosecond, not really realistically, trying to notch but without success. With a human pilot at this point, I would have handed over the scenario, and I can see them switching to aim 9 with the target on the nose, ready for a follow-up shot. Tac view is always interesting to watch, even if the scenarios are very simple as this one. The track conveys extremely well the dynamics and the process of conducting these simple exercises. Another scenario this time we want is turn conversion turn. From the wizard perspective, the goal is handling over the aeroplane in a known position suitable to perform the turn. In this case, I will try to do it, but I cannot guarantee the quality of the maneuver. However, most of the time, moving to pure pursuit at about 7 nautical miles works okay-ish for a wings level in the rear quarter within a couple of miles from the target. When it comes to the gates, if you come from the Tomcat, you are surely used to the Navy's values. Let's stick to those for the moment. For simplicity's sake, we use the same setup as last time. The target is flying 120. The initial assessment gives us a radar hit at circa 60 miles, 25 left. Ergo AA equals 145 and TA 35. Not too bad, what we need to do is a turn to recip, then collision as we hit TA 40. Now this is a very academical way of doing it, and can lead to overcorrections, as we technically need only 5 degrees before turning to collision. For example, lagging the target would add the drift we need to get to 140 AA or 40 TA, and then capture them with CCE. I ran this mission twice, the first time using the drift, the second following the book. As we will see, this is a good example of why studying these topics is great, but the procedures are very scholastic. And eventually the GIB should find its own way of handling situations. Since we know the angles already, I immediately introduced an offset. By placing the target near the nose, almost on pure, I will over time drift towards our right hand side, thus increasing the target aspect, which is precisely what we want. Next, another turn to set up a collision. However, I had not stopped Iceman where I wanted to be, and a few seconds passed before I realized that. Unfortunately, maths is in fact not an opinion, and 150 and 140 are not the same number. I had to correct the angles again. With Iceman steady at 010, ATA 35 and AA about 145, that's better. The drift was still present and visible, a combination of imperfect angles and speed difference. At 25 miles more or less, I turned port to reduce ATA to 30. F-15 nautical miles I was about to lock, but I forgot to check the antenna elevation first, introducing a delay, then STT and end over. I mentioned in the previous part, there are many ways to perform the conversion, most of them are very academic. Since I'm not a pilot, I prefer the ignorant pure pursuit at 7 nautical miles. Again, in this case I was a tad late and I also forgot to accelerate the climb. The computational mistake plus the fiddly angles management and Iceman resulted in an imperfect maneuver. However, I prefer showing these kind of examples rather than a perfect execution, as they clearly demonstrate how mistakes are recoverable. The important is reassessing the computation and compensate. By the way, this is the first time I have executed a stern conversion using only the DD impulse, but the concepts are always the same. Before wrapping this up, this is a TAC view of the same conversion using the scholastic approach, which invites to use 0-cut or 180HCA. As you can see, the correction is, in my opinion, excessive, and on top of Iceman taking its time to do the turn, eventually led to a quite abysmal arrival at the displacement turn. In fact, I studied the turn with TA about 50, which is fine-ish, considering how Tomcat is faster with 14 nautical miles to go, and completed it that I was at 65, definitely too much. However, eventually went fine. So if the previous example demonstrated that errors can be amended, the second scenario, as shown, our proper geometry is important, but there is a margin for imperfection. As long as good as is maintained, we can make most situations work. Experience and practice help a lot in this regard, but at the end of the day we play a video game, so we don't spend the whole day in ground school or in a cockpit. That being said, I hope you have found this series useful. Actual combat situations are very different from these simple scenarios where the target is not maneuvering, but they constitute a solid first step to get familiar with our aircraft and the basics of geometry. Thanks for watching, and take care.